Welcome to the session as we're going to look at recovering the classroom as sanctified space, human formation away from the screen. My name is Josh Polling. I'm a classical educator with Classroom Conversations. I tutor upper-level high school students in a curriculum that includes math and physics and Latin and theology, world history and ancient literature. It culminates in a senior thesis paper and public defense. I'm also head elder at All Saints Lutheran Church. I'm a speaker and writer on a variety of cultural theological topics. Before all of that, I was a public school teacher, a high school history teacher and coach for 13 years. Until I resigned due to a variety of ideological factors, but that would be a presentation for another day. So welcome to the session. Just a few things to point out on the handout here. On the top, I've got an outline for you to help you track what we're going to be discussing. Okay, and then I have some published articles on these topics if you want to read further about the things we're discussing today in a variety of journals and publications. And then at the bottom, some resources for further reading and research. I've broken down into 3 categories: reflections on technology, reflections on education, and reflections on embodiment. Those are really the 3 threads that we're weaving together in this session. And those resources there include both secular and Christian authors. I think it's important to gather insights and glean insights from a variety of sources. And then at the bottom, if you want to continue the discussions, if you have good ideas that have worked or so forth, I have my email there. We all need each other in these times we live in. And so if you want to have a dialogue or critique anything I'm saying, certainly open to that. And then I have also a link to a full writing portfolio. I have a digital version of this handout and other handouts from other speaking engagements, and also articles and podcasts there. Okay, so that's sort of the practical stuff. Any questions on the layout as we get going here? I'll probably pause briefly after each of the Roman numerals in the outline, just to make sure you're tracking, and if you have any questions or clarifications, and hopefully there'll be time at the end as well. Okay? All right, so here we go. 3 things we're going to do today. First, I want to explore what I call the digital world, or the digital worldview that we find ourselves in, and how at roots in this world we live in that is so digitized, there's actually a faulty view of the human person, what I would call mind-body dualism, that goes hand in hand with constructed identity and neo-Gnosticism. Then we're going to look at 2 main lines of arguments. The first one will look at the nature of the human person and the primacy of the body in the human experience, a proper theology of the body, and how that should rightly inform our educational practice and pedagogy. Then another line of argument will focus in on the nature of education and the primacy of imitation, tradition, and physicality in education properly understood. Then we'll conclude with some practical applications and possible ideas to help us navigate our homes and classrooms when it comes to digital dilemmas. Today, no space seems safe from the colonizing forces of digital technology. There is a seamless blending of the human and the digital, occurring in ways previously unthinkable. This is what some call transhumanism, with its alluring promises of increased intelligence, longer life expectancy, and ease of living. And pandemic living has further expanded the role of the ubiquitous screen, especially in the world of education. For the sake of human formation and flourishing, it is essential to recapture the real and carve out sanctified spaces of peace and refuge away from the mesmerizing pull of screens and digital technologies. But first, we must understand what is at work behind the digital worldview and extract ourselves from the mindset it carries. And this begins by realizing that technology is never neutral. It brings with it a world picture. If you go to the forest with an axe on your shoulder, you would view the forest and your relation to it in one way. Using that axe to chop down the big oak tree takes sweat, labor, effort, time, calluses, blisters on your hands. Go to the forest with a bulldozer and a logging truck, and the view is quite another. See, technologies bring with them a picture of the world. They push us towards certain understandings of ourselves and the world. All technologies, technes, tools in Greek, do this. But digital technologies carry with them a strong tendency towards disembodiment, more so than older technologies, say agricultural technologies, transportation technologies, or industrial technologies. Those still at least required some bodily action in conjunction with them. They were mechanical, they were analog, right? They were still handled, they had to be repaired. You could see them, you could see how they worked with all the mechanical parts. Digital technologies are in large part hidden, invisible, maybe even non-real, mystifying. They're not just tools or standalone devices. They actually become a habitat in which we live. They become reality-mediating mechanisms for us, right? I think that's the big difference we need to understand with digital technologies. They're not just tools in the sense of prior technologies. They're much more reality-mediating mechanisms, right? We view reality through them. That's a categorical difference, I think, that we need to reckon with. Samuel James summarizes this insidious danger when he writes, quote, "The internet is not a singular tool or hobby. It is an immersive epistemological habitat in which we live. No other technology is as disruptive to traditional forms of human activity," end quote. That is to say, online technologies are not only tools that are potential sources of illicit content, the very form of digital technology shapes us and how we do. So we're going to turn to that in Roman numeral 2. So any questions, clarifications on Roman numeral 1, the digital worldview, that technology is not neutral, and that digital technology carries with it more of a tendency towards disembodiment. Any questions or clarifications at this point? Okay, all right, let's keep moving to Roman numeral 2.
Actually, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
When we talked about social media or these specifically.
Basically a screen, by digital technology, I mean a screen-based device in some sort. So a smartphone, a computer, television, digital technologies could be, yeah, we could define it that way. Good question. We want to define our terms, right? Good classical principle. Thank you. Okay, so part 2, problems in relation to the human person and problems in relation to education, where the digital worldview goes wrong. Digital technologies catechize us towards a dualistic picture of humanity that usually follows one of 2 trajectories. One treats us as if we're just thinking things, brains on a stick, calculating machines, cognitive devices, humans as flesh robots or computers. Even the information processing model of human intelligence that is so popular today really views human beings as computers, okay? Brains on a stick. That's one trajectory. Another trajectory views us that we're just feeling things, hearts on a stick, driven by emotions and instincts, a bundle of desires to be expressed. And behind a screen, it's very easy to be one of those 2 things, a thinking thing or a feeling thing. It's easy to be a thinking thing because you're typing and sending messages, right? You're reading and listening, but it's all done at a distance, not in connection to real people and real things. It's also easy to be just a feeling thing behind a screen. Frustration and anger, like and dislike, passion and desire can easily be expressed with the push of a button and the swipe. And of course, emotions and instincts are easily intensified by the proliferation of exciting content that awakens the worst in our natures. In both trajectories, the feeling trajectory and the thinking trajectory, dualism reigns. In both cases, we've separated the person from their body. It's not in some way, shape, or form. In one way, we're putting the mind, the intellect, above the body. In the other way, we're putting the feeling, the heart, above the whole person. Not only does dualism in one way or another reign in the digital ecosystem, we are pushed further towards understanding personal identity as internally constructed and self-chosen. This is huge today, right? Expressive individualism, living your truth, right? All the phrases that we've seen flashing before our eyes in the highest holy month of Pride, which has colonized space and time, right? It's all language of self-constructed identity, right? Why is that happening? Well, because for generations, we've told ourselves that we can be whatever we want, right? That we can do anything we want. And in the digital world, you sort of really can. So digital technologies goes hand in hand with this constructed view of the self that we have today. It makes it possible and palatable and plausible. Okay. If you want to dig further into that, I'd highly recommend Carl Trueman's work on the topic of identity, The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self, where he traces the trajectory of the self to where we've got today, right? And he argues that transgenderism and all the various constructed forms of identity we're seeing today are basically a logical outworking of what we've been saying for really ever since the Enlightenment about the universe, that we're autonomous individuals who create our own identity. Where does that lead? Well, it leads to where we're at, right? Digital technologies go hand in hand with that. They make that possible, right? And plausible and palatable. Also online, we can create what are called a fine-grained identity, okay? You can sort of tweak and tailor yourself. You can curate what's presented, right? You can try on new identities. You can remake them at will. And it's always a work of ongoing discovery. Always becoming, never being. In such a world, reality is just raw material to be manipulated as one chooses. The locus of meaning and truth has shifted from external reality to the internal self of mind and feeling, all mediated by a screen. Behind a screen, you do have a sense of control. You click, you get. You swipe, you see. The hard edges of reality are eased, softened, and distorted. But as a growing body of research reveals, this digital way of living diminishes our capacities to flourish as human beings, as we risk losing some of our natural abilities for learning about the world by acting directly upon it. Our embodiment is not an accident. As bodily creatures, we have inbuilt limits that are purposeful and for our good. Our bodies bind us to one location at a time and place us within humanely scaled and manageable frameworks that guide us towards what we should attend to. Such guardrails actually make the world navigable, understandable, and manageable. They remind us that the world is to be experienced directly with our bodies. Now, that real human interaction experienced directly with our bodies and with one another has friction. It has awkward moments, right? It has trying to figure out what to say, right? Making eye contact or not. It has encounters with physical stuff, right? Gravel to skin your knee on. People you might bump into. People you might not like. Reality has edges, friction. So what makes digital technology so alluring is the removal of all this friction. When screen time for teens today averages 8 hours a day for entertainment and leisure, not including any schoolwork, and the average smartphone user clicks, taps, or swipes their phone how many times a day? 2,617. It's pretty clear that we are consuming and being consumed by both form and content that run counter to truth, goodness, beauty, and also counter to the central role of the human body in human formation. So let's explore further how this digital worldview creates problems in the realm of education. Digital technologies further entrench the transactional, pragmatic model of education, where efficiency, data, and job preparation reign, as students are treated like products being prepared for the 21st century workforce. This economic and technological vision for education is further found, for example, in the primacy of STEM, right? Science, technology, engineering, and math. All good things. But in current educational policies across the country, they tend to be exalted above all else, don't they? We also see this in the broad push for technological competence in American education, digital literacy, as it's called, and in the many one-to-one device initiatives across the country, where in many districts now, kindergartners even are getting Chromebooks. Looking for techno solutions to educational problems has a long history. Yet, as Todd Oppenheimer documents in The Flickering Mind, technological solutions to educational problems have consistently overpromised and underperformed. Radio, film, television, then computers, all were promised to revolutionize education, but all failed to deliver in any significant way. Another problematic assumption built into the technological approach to education is that increased information access is the solution to educational problems. Neil Postman prophetically predicted this in 1990 when he said, quote, "Through the computers, the heralds say, we will make education better. Through more and more information, more conveniently packaged, more swiftly delivered, we will find solutions to our problems." But information access has never been a primary function of a school. For centuries, there has been more access to more information than any one person can learn. The real challenge comes in knowing what to do with that information, how to organize it into a coherent whole through a rightly ordered curriculum. Thus, digitalization contributes to the idea that education is all about information exchange or information access, as if students are simply just saving new files on their hard drive. Well, what part of the dualistic trajectory is that? Well, that's humans as thinking things, brains on a stick, right? Saving files on their hard drive. Another major issue that technology magnifies in relation to education is the constructivist nature of modern educational theory, which I mentioned prior. In this view of education, students construct their own knowledge. In the words of prominent educational theorist Maxine Green, who most teacher trainees read in college, quote, "The teacher must make it possible for his students to create meanings in a cosmos devoid of objective meaning, to find reasons for being." From this perspective, truth, meaning, and reality aren't verifiably real, and certainly aren't revealed by God. Instead, we construct it all for ourselves, in accord with what makes us happy. Humans as feeling things, the other side of the trajectory. This dangerous concept of constructivism has been the foundation of American progressive education for several generations, and again, now is made even more possible, palatable, and plausible in the digital age, where you can choose to construct anything online and attempt to make it so in reality. As we move now into the application section, we have to remind ourselves of this. Humans are not economic plug-and-play devices, downloading information from their teachers, preparing for the job market. Humans are not just thinking things or disembodied spirits hovering in the shadowy regions of the internet, clicking their way to college. Humans are not just feeling things, self-creating and constructing their own knowledge and reality from their inner desires, and intensified by digital tech and social media. Rather, humans are embodied souls. We don't just have bodies. We are bodies. And we need to make sure our educational practices and habits make this clear. So that's Roman numeral 2, where the digital worldview goes wrong. It leads to problems in how we understand the human person, and it leads us towards a very sort of efficiency-driven, technological-driven, data-driven approach to education. Questions, clarifications on Roman numeral 2? Yes, sir.
So you point to digital technology as sort of the apex of this, but I think you can go back to technology as early as like writing, right? Like that's used in education. It dissociates the idea from the physical person talking to you, right? Like many of the things that you're talking about here, you can take even back to like writing or, reading Cicero or whatever.
For
He's
sure.
not a real person that we can talk to anymore.
For sure. Plato had a big critique of writing. He did. He thought it would ruin our memories, right? And that embodied nature of knowledge, for sure. Yes, all technology, you can see how it brings good to world picture, right? It becomes a way that we view ourselves and the world. So yes, I would totally agree with you, that, or Mr. Sorry, that yes, we could do the same thing with any technology. I think what's maybe, I would say, at least somewhat different with digital technologies is its disembodied nature and the fact that it becomes a reality mediating mechanism in the way a book would not. Right? A book is still a physical object that has a sense of logical order, right, from beginning to end. Yes, it is abstract in the sense it's disembodied from the author. But I think there is something, at least in some way, different in the digital world. Maybe we could explore that more after the last section. Good question. Yes, sir.
Isn't that inherent in all asynchronous communication, though?
Yeah, the telegraph, right? David Henry, what's his name? Thoreau had a big critique of the telegraph. Why should I care what's happening in Texas when I live in New England, right? So yes, anytime you separate the speaker from the message, yes, you have the same problem. But again, I think there's some inherent things about digital technology that make it more dangerous. In the fact that it's not just a tool, it's a reality mediating mechanism. You live in digital technology, okay, in a way you don't live in the telegraph, or you don't live in a book, okay? It blurs the line between physical reality and sort of, I don't know the right word, maybe artificial reality, okay? It blurs the line in a way that prior technologies I don't think do, or maybe don't tend to as much. Again, maybe we could continue to unpack that in the questions afterwards. Any other clarifications or comments at this point? No. Okay. So let's move into some of the practical implications. Very good. Thank you for those questions. I appreciate that. Okay, so now some practical implications and ideas. Our confession of the goodness of the body should be made crystal clear by reclaiming education's low-tech form as a better way to secure human flourishing, by focusing on topics and texts that have stood the test of time and their ordinary transmission through dialogue and discussion, where words are spoken, read, written, and shared. When education's driving force is human-to-human interaction, small in scale, personal in nature, historical in focus, we can better treasure the fully human ways of knowing and being. These are the foods that nourish and strengthen humanity to resist the totalizing effects of the ever-present screen. It is vital that we recover a humane education, where students and teachers, parents and children are fully present with one another, gathered around the perennial subjects and questions that form humanity's great conversation. So here's some practical suggestions. 1, create sanctified spaces. The work of forming human persons through education has become even more challenging now that almost everyone carries around a smartphone in their pockets, what Jonathan Haidt calls a human experience blocker. What a great term. A human experience blocker. When the smartphone burst onto the scene, classroom dynamics changed drastically with immediate personalized access to anything. Such unbounded access easily drives one's focus away from the people and content in the classroom and further into the self. The screen tends to turn us further in curvatures and say. A rightly ordered education, however, leads students beyond the inward turn. True education is not catering to students' inner tastes or building their self-esteem. Rather, it consists in refining and elevating their immature instincts and habits into mature and life-sustaining ones. To be sure, this is an arduous, lifelong task. On our best days, we only approximate. But we should take simple, measurable steps to at least communicate that this is the goal. So here's what I did regarding smartphones in my classroom. First off, there's a huge range of policies across the country as far as what to do with smartphones in the classroom. Some schools have phone lockers, some have brown paper bags, some say put them away and they just sort of manage it teacher by teacher. Some schools do nothing. And so at the time I was working at a public high school, a large diverse high school, about 1,500 kids, whole range of socioeconomic and ethnic status and so forth. And so classrooms were changing, as many of you I'm sure experienced as smartphones came on the scene around 2008 and forward. So I came up with a plan. I was going to collect them at the beginning of class and put them in like phone pouches, you know, the math teacher calculator pouches. So I was going to have one of those on the back of my closet door, and I was going to collect them, put them all in there. So I talked to my principal about that, and he was pretty skeptical, but he said I could try it. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to do it. And so I did. So first day of school came with a new semester, a bunch of 17-year-olds. These were juniors in high school. U.S. history was what I was teaching at the time. And so I had my speech prepared and tried to sell this, right? You got to sell things like this to students because they can sniff out a phony, right? Oh, wait for it, phony. Yeah. All right, sorry. Bad dad joke. Sorry, my daughters will roll their eyes. Anyway. But you do have to sell things like this, and you need to buy into it too. If you're going to take on such a policy in your classroom, you need to authentically buy into it for it to work. It won't work otherwise. So here's what I said, basically. This is sort of a short version, and I had it written out in the syllabus. But here's basically what I told them the first day. Let's face it, phones are everywhere. So in this classroom, we're going to take a much-needed, refreshing break to create a place to think deeply and discuss face-to-face with one another in a more human way. This is especially important for us in our world today, where phones have worked their way into every minute and aspect of our lives. A history class is a perfect place to take a break from this never-ending, gotta check my phone rat race. So we're going to work to be fully present with one another and engaging the big story of history and the big questions of humanity. Now, this is not about creating another rule for you, or saying, ooh, naughty, naughty teenagers with their phones. This is not a kids these days rule. This is about us as people. This is because I care about you and your education. This is a challenge for you to prove all those naysayers wrong who say you can't live without your phones. You can do this, and I will do this with you. And by the end of the semester, you might just come to like the break from your phone. I asked for any questions. There were some rolled eyes and crossed arms and clicking tongues, but that was not a surprise. So on the second day of school during warm-up, I collected their phones. I went around the room and collected them and put them in the assigned pouches. And of course, I put my phone in the pouch as well. Now this created a bit of laughter in the classroom because at the time I still had a flip phone. For 15 years. It was the first purchase my wife and I made together when we were engaged. We were like, hey, let's get phones together. So we got flip phones. And it lasted for 15 years. Until finally they said, no more will it be served. Thankfully, my marriage has lasted longer than that first phone. But they had fun with that. One of the students said, hey, Mr. Pauling, the dinosaurs are calling. They want their phone back. So I guess I've outlasted the dinosaurs. Anyway, they really put their phones in the pouches. They gave me their phones, okay? And they did it every day, all year. At the end of class, I would reverse the procedure. And once students were accustomed to the routine, resistance was pretty minimal. If you set expectations, they will probably meet them. Was it hard? Yeah. Were there challenges? Yeah. But we got through it. And by the end of the year, when the students reflected on their experiment, they felt a sense of pride and accomplishment. What a great reversal of the kids these days. Intentionally creating a classroom refuge away from the lure of their screens fostered better class discussions, fewer distractions, and deeper reflections. Consequently, my principal asked me to present the policy to the whole faculty for school-wide implementation the following year. You won't know how many thank yous I got from fellow teachers that year. Whether your classroom is a traditional school, a designated corner of the house, or the dining room table, sanctifying the space from digital chatter is important. It reconsecrates and opens up a sanctuary for students and teachers, parents and children to be fully present with each other in learning, reflecting, thinking, and discussing. In your educational setting, that may mean phone pouches. It may not. It may mean something as simple as a basket to put your phone in when you're homeschooling. It may mean keeping your own phones in a certain space in your home and having certain places where your phone doesn't go. It may mean having some type of divider in your house, a screen or a tri-fold stand that you can move out to sanctify the space for where education takes place. There's all sorts of ways to do so, but the principle remains that the classroom, the educative space, should be sanctified in some way. It should be different because spaces communicate, as we've learned yesterday. Another thing, recover the common arts. You need to challenge the dichotomy between mental and physical work. White-collar work is not more worthy than blue-collar. The stigmatization of the physical is problematic because it pushes students towards jobs as knowledge workers, completing abstract and measurable tasks, instead of also considering the mental and physical satisfaction of the skilled trades. Both are important. Both require thinking and reasoning. Both are great ways to make a living, and one is not more valuable than the other. In education, we must find ways to include the common arts, or manual arts, as they were once called, to help our students develop skills for a well-rounded life, where they can be just as comfortable turning a wrench as writing a paper, just as comfortable in the kitchen as in the In my setting, one of the things my wife and I have done is we host summer camps for kids called Closer to Home. We teach kids the skills of what I call resilient living. My wife teaches home ec, I teach shop class. And the kids begin the process of seeing the home not as a place of consumption, but as a place of productivity and creativity. Third idea, engage the body and embrace physicality. Learning is not solely a mental activity. It is a holistic process that forms the whole person. A good education includes formation in this way as well. Exercise, sport, music, songs, motions, learning an instrument, learning a skill. And sometimes, even as Augustine said, there are some problems that can only be solved by walking. Sometimes it's along the way, right? While doing something else that great insights are forged. While your hands are busy, your minds can engage differently and discuss freely. Some of the best conversations I've ever had with my wife has been when we've been running. Sometimes when we finish the run, we don't say another word for quite a while. Sometimes the conversation continues for a long time. Another way to embrace human physicality and engage the body is by reading real books. The tangible book conveys a sense of permanence amidst transience and of logical order with a beginning and end. Also incorporating beautiful art and music to help elevate students' tastes beyond basal instinct. Also, the original hands-on activity of writing with pen and paper engages the body and mind in a deeper way than screens, and ensures that students are not unintentionally alienating themselves from their work through a mediating screen technology. A few points on this from CCLE founder Andrew Kern I think are helpful. Kern argues that, quote, we should not use technology to replace human faculties because that harms the child. Using a technology to do what human faculties are designed to do causes the human faculties to weaken and atrophy rather than to be built up and refined. If we are cutting off our children from their very own faculties by using technology, we are cutting them off from virtue and wisdom. End quote. He talks further, this was in a presentation at a CCLE conference years back, he talked further about technologies that enhance human faculties versus technologies that replace human faculties. Okay, so think about a pencil, right? A pencil is a technology, right? Any tool you use is a technology, okay? So a pencil enhances your human faculty of writing. It allows you to be more precise, right? Because it's got a point on it and so forth. It's better than your finger in the sand. but you're still engaging with that in a way that allows your human faculty of dexterity and writing to show up. Okay? Kern would argue, though, that introducing a keyboard very early actually atrophies that human faculty, right? Or you could think about a calculator, right? An early introduction of the calculator atrophies the human faculty of calculating and manipulating numbers in your brain effectively, right? So it's not that you can never use a calculator or a keyboard, but we need to make sure we introduce them in ways that we're not atrophying the human faculties that they're related to. So he argued in that presentation that he would delay those types of things for quite some time until those human faculties are well developed, right? The muscles have to be well developed for then those things to be used properly in the educational environment. So those are some areas that we can look at to correct this sort of digital worldview we find ourselves in. Create sanctified spaces, incorporate the common arts, engage the body. Some areas for further exploration there that are listed in the last point, Roman numeral 3b. These I'm just going to briefly mention for further exploration. Mimesis, educere, and scole. Mimesis, the idea that education is primarily imitation, okay? This means that the teacher needs to embody knowledge, all right? That it's not just information exchange. The teacher is sort of the master leading the way. And so in that sense, teaching is really an incarnational vocation, okay? We could look at educere, the idea of leading out of the cave, right? Plato's shadowy cave into the experience of reality. I think you can make some comparisons there with digital tech and how it sort of keeps us in the shadows or the shallows, as Nicholas Carr says. And then scole, the idea of leisure or contemplation and meditation, reflection. I think that's an important thing to keep in mind as well. That we don't get so caught up in sort of the rat race of education and efficiency and so forth, that we have that orientation of scole. And then I think a couple points from Neil Postman are helpful as well. He was, I think, one of the best 20th century social critics, and his insights into technology, education, and society really, I think, resonate quite well with the classical approach to education. He said with technology, first off, serious thought should be undertaken before any technology is implemented in the classroom. Whether it's a film strip, a computer, a Chromebook, a smartphone, or anything in between. That we need to think intentionally about what is the technology communicating. Not what we are communicating through the technology. What is the technology communicating? He said this as well. We should always maintain, quote, an epistemological and psychic distance from any technology. It should always appear somewhat strange, never inevitable, never natural. Another important point from Postman, I think, is that we should teach about technology in the class, not so much as how to use technology, but how technology uses us. A history of technology, that is, or a philosophy of technology. We probably don't need to teach our students really specific technological skills. They're probably already better than we are at it, right? Okay. And we also can't predict what they're going to need in 5 or 10 years technologically. But we do need to help them learn to navigate the world of technology. So we need to think about that as well. How can we not be so concerned about the fact that they'll know how to find something online, but more so what those technologies are also doing to them? So sort of a history of technology, he argues, should be part of the curriculum. So the ideas I'm suggesting here, I think, help us can reclaim the classroom as a sanctified space and help us form our students and ourselves towards truth, goodness, and beauty away from the screen. These are not novel ideas. I think they stand the test of time because they're grounded in truths about the human person and about what education actually is. Finding ways to implement these ideas in our varied contexts help us fight against the digital dismantling of the real. Similar principles can also strengthen our homes. We need to carve out device-free spaces and times in our homes for our own sanity and for the development of meaningful family relationships and traditions. So too in the church. Our life in Christ is strengthened when Christian teaching is embodied in worship that engages the human body and all our senses. The primary work of the church in the ministry of word and sacrament requires physicality and presence. In the word proclaimed and in the Eucharist celebrated, Christ delivers himself in his very person. for us. This doesn't require screens or devices, and in many cases, those things might actually intrude upon or obscure the nature of God's work. Forming rich habits and thick practices that embrace embodiment and human-to-human interaction in education, home, and church keep us firmly grounded in the real, unmediated by the technological layers enveloping us in everyday life. In our homes and educational settings, we need nooks and crannies for contemplation that birth new insight. We need sanctified spaces for silence that bring forth peace. We need alcoves for awkward boredom that blossom into creativity. So too in our churches, we need moments of meditation where we are uninterrupted by flashing screens and notification dings. We need places of permanence where our human finitude encounters divine life through water, word, bread, and wine. We need times for transcendence where we are steered away from digital evanescence and restored into the realm of the real, both transcendent and physical. These are the sanctified spaces in which human formation takes place. No screen or app required. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Do you have a resource for parents of young children? We're seeing more where parents will tell us that they're showing their children how to walk by putting them on the screen, by showing the children walking on the screen. Do you have resources for some of the parents? Resources
On technology itself and how to. There's a couple good books by Andy Crouch on sort of how to live as a Christian in relation to technology. Trevor Sutton's book, Redeeming Technology, is also pretty good. I'm not sure if those two go into specifically the sort of early childhood aspect to how to interact with screens. So I don't have any good ones for the early years there. That's a good question. Maybe somebody here have more on that. I think I'm going to take a cue from Andrew Kern there. It's probably when handwriting is pretty well developed, or at least all the way, so that it's not atrophying the skill of writing by hand. So with our girls, I think we probably started that sort of late elementary school, maybe 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, starting to learn typing. So now what they do is they usually write their papers by hand. They're 10 and 12 right now. So they usually write their papers by hand as of now, and then they go on to type it on the computer that way. Yeah, that's sort of where we're at. Yes, sir. I think I would try the same. If I was a college professor, I would probably try the same thing I did in my high school classroom, and that is smartphones. We're gonna collect or have away and have put away in some fashion. And then also with Chromebooks, they didn't have them out. When we were engaged with each other, when we were using them for a specific task of research, yes, they could have them open and out. But if we were in a normal direct instruction setting or discussion or anything, that's not on the table. There are some universities that have gone away from laptops in the classroom and screens in the classroom as they're realizing that it's not working. So yeah, I think it's a basic principle. We need full presence with each other in the classroom, and screens they don't have to, but they tend to create a cloud, right? A mediating experience in reality. Yeah. I mean, we're trying to form human persons, right? And that takes practice, it takes habits. But the long-term goal isn't that they have a couch at their house, right? The long-term goal is that they learn how to manage and navigate it, and they know not to have it out at all times. But maybe that takes a couch for a while at least. Education is really at core a pretty low-tech endeavor. Tools can certainly be used to improve the endeavor, but at its core, it's human-to-human interaction. It's modeling, it's imitation towards truth, goodness, and beauty. And that's been going on a long time. Yes, sir.
Have you found anything particularly helpful talking to younger parents who themselves have grown up with this technology that's been more persuasive than otherwise arguing? Because some of the conversations are met with a brick wall, like you might have experienced with your students in history class, trying to tell them why we don't use Chromebooks in 1st grade. It's dumb.
Yeah, that's a challenge. I think we're at our homeschool co-op. we see that from the younger parents and the older parents. There's just a different relationship to technology because of sort of being a digital native versus a digital immigrant, as the terms were called, right? So yeah, I think it takes time. I think it also takes embodied practice to see what it's actually like to take a break from the phone, right? So I think that was what's so powerful with the students. They had to experience what it was like to take a break from the phone. And then many of them did come to like it by the end of the semester, which is why it became a school-wide policy, because they were talking about it. So yeah, there's have to be some way to experience sort of life without the phone. So I don't know your context enough to go for that, but yeah, I think that's going to be a challenge for sure. Anything else? Well, thank you so much for your time and discussion and engagement. If you'd like to discuss further, I'd be happy to.